Clean it up towards the hole like that, and then there's less dig it down, right beside it, would you please? Oh, you seen that there, Kevin? Does that look like quite a contraption to you or what?
That looks like a lot of something.
We're done. Let's go.
The Cool Hand Luke cast tells fans what they never knew. People have called it the best movie ever about fighting power. A performance that made Paul Newman the most enticing rebel in Hollywood. A story that showed people in America how much it costs to break a man's heart. Keep your cool, Luke. Among movie fans of all time, this story of defiance against overwhelming governmental power is one of the most heartbreaking movies ever made. But what if I told you that there are thousands of hidden stories beneath the surface that not even the biggest fans have found? The curtain is being pulled back on Cool Hand Luke's best-kept secrets today. New information from the actors and crew who acted in this well-known story. The movie's hidden meanings, the big reveal at the beginning, and the symbolic details that are placed all over it totally change how you understand Luke Jackson's journey. From Newman's shocking admissions about his link to Luke, to the dramatic changes George Kennedy made for his Oscar-winning part, to the scenes that were cut that would have given the movie a whole new meaning. The story of Cool Hand Luke that hasn't been told before. When we're done, I promise you that you'll never look at those mirrored sunglasses or hear the phrase failure to communicate the same way again. The movie that broke Hollywood rules. Before we get into what the cast told us, we need to know something very important. Cool Hand Luke wasn't meant to be the movie it is now. It was meant to be safer, more common, and much easier to get permission for. Warner Brothers at first thought of the project as a simple prison story that would be fun to watch but not memorable. What they didn't expect was for director Stuart Rosenberg to want to make something much more dangerous. Rosenberg and screenwriter Frank Pearson wanted to make a movie that would make people think about not only prison conditions but also the whole system of power in the United States during the height of the Vietnam War. Jack Lemmon used to own the rights to the book, but he sold them when he realized he wasn't cut out to play the lead. The project got the star power it needed to break new ground when Paul Newman joined. He was already known for supporting the underground, so he saw right away that the movie could be used to make a point about the growing gap between generations in America. Studio officials were not happy with the script's more direct attacks on authority. Rosenberg and Newman came up with a great plan in reaction. They would make their anti-establishment movie look more normal on the outside while hiding more important messages inside. The studio leaders missed the deeper criticisms that were right in front of them because they were too focused on the simple story of the jail escape. Later, Newman thought, but everyone knew, that basic conflict between the individual and the institution. This opposition to Hollywood's usual ways of telling stories led to one of the most important movies of its time. A prison drama that seemed easy but had a revolutionary message about how the human spirit won't be broken by ways to control things. The Real Prison Experience. Finding tough real-life prison conditions to film in was one of the most important parts of making the movie feel real. Cool Hand Luke wasn't mostly filmed on sound stages like most jail movies are. Instead, it was mostly filmed in the sweltering Central Valley and San Joaquin River Delta regions of California. The violent scenes with the chain gang weren't just acting. They were shot in over 100-degree heat with the actors doing real work. The production crew built a makeshift jail camp in Stockton, California, with the goal of making it as uncomfortable and limiting as possible. In his autobiography, George Kennedy, who won an Oscar for his part as Dragline, wrote that the conditions changed the performances in a big way. In that unbearably hot weather, we were really out there breaking rocks and paving roads. You didn't have to act tired, burnt or dirty after a few days. You were already those things. It made the movie seem more real than it was. The jail uniforms made it feel more real. They were made of stiff, heavy denim that got stiff when they got wet, and filth. It was told to the wardrobe staff not to clean them often, so they got real dirt and smells on them. To keep things consistent and real, Newman demanded that his uniform not be washed during filming. Paul Newman, who was already known for how hard he worked at his job, pushed himself to the limits during filming. Newman did the real work in scenes where Luke is punished by having to repeatedly dig a hole and then fill it back in. The physical toll of these scenes could be seen on screen, making the figures even more worn out. The physical challenges had an unexpected effect. They brought the group closer together. The actors who played prisoners were grouped together against the weather, which was similar to how their characters were grouped together against the jail system. They would often keep hanging out together after shooting was over for the day. This is how they learned the shorthand language and group dynamics that you can see in the prison yard scenes of the movie. Stuart Rosenberg, the director, supported this friendship because he knew it would translate to screen reality. During breaks between takes, he often kept the cameras rolling to catch the players interacting naturally, which made it into the final cut. This method created some of the most natural and interesting group dynamics in the movie. As Lou Antonio and Coco later explained, we weren't just playing a jail gang. In many ways we had become one. There was a set order, a running joke, and a way for us to look out for each other. That wasn't in the story, but you see it on the screen. The people who are behind the people. Many viewers don't know that each of the main actors gave their roles long and complicated backstories. Details were used to guide every move and word in the movie, but they were never directly shown. Paul Newman saw Luke Jackson as a lot more than just another bad guy when he talked to him. In an interview about his process, he talked about how he carefully built Luke's past, focusing on his time in the service. Newman said that Luke isn't just resisting because he wants to. He served in the war and got honors, but when he came back, people didn't accept the person the war had made him. This military past, which was only briefly shown in the movie, was very important to Newman's understanding of the character. Luke's refusal to follow the rules wasn't just because he was stubborn, it was because he had seen how pointless death and pain were in war. So what did breaking the parking meter matter after that? Newman added subtle military etiquette to his act. How Luke stands at attention when he first talks to the captain, how carefully he makes beds, and how he can handle being hit. For his part as dragline, George Kennedy may have gone through the most dramatic changes. Kennedy had to imagine himself fully as the prison yard's alpha male, because he was best known for playing tough military men and authority figures. With an unexpected weakness, actually put on weight for the part, and studied how Southern prisoners behave. The most important thing he did was make a detailed account of Dragline's crimes and time in jail before Luke got there. As Kennedy wrote in his book, I decided Dragline had been in that prison for 12 years. He began as just another new fish, but he fought his way to the top of the prisoner order, and now thought of himself as a kind of good king. Luke was the first person who really questioned not only his physical power, but also his whole The most interesting thing about the preparation is probably Morgan Woodward's work as Godfrey, the boss who wore sunglasses and was silent. Woodward used to be chatty and friendly, but before a movie shoot, he would shut himself away for an hour, and not talk to anyone. During the whole production, he purposely stayed away from the players who played prisoners, and never hung out with them between takes. These choices about the characters show how the actors give their parts complicated psychological depth, which is what turned Cool Hand Luke from a simple prison drama into a deep look at power, resistance and human worth. What most fans miss about the holy meanings is the cool hand. Luke is full of Christian symbols that many people, even die-hard fans, miss the first few times they watch it. The actors and crew have stated that these religious parallels were purposely used in the movie. The most clear picture of Christ is when Luke, having eaten 50 eggs, lies on the table with his arms stretched out in a crucifixion position, but this is only the most obvious of many such parallels. Stuart Rosenberg, the director, carefully put together a visual story that connects Luke's journey with Jesus Christ's. Rosenberg studied religion before becoming a director. Luke's mother, played by Jo Van Fleet, visits him. She sits on top of her truck like a Madonna, and he stands below her, which is meant to look like Michelangelo's Pietà. The cigarettes she gives Luke make a cloud of smoke around him, which changes the way he looks for a short time. Her last words, "You know you're never coming back from this road," foreshadowed his death, just as Mary knew what would happen to Jesus. The famous scene of washing the car, the part where Luke sprays water over the beautiful woman Joy Harmon as a joke, is a baptism scene. The scene looks like a dream, because it was shot with different lighting and pacing than the rest of the movie. This shows that it is symbolic rather than real. As Luke baptizes them, it's a time for the prisoners to become spiritually awake. In the movie, Luke is punished over and over for disobeying authority, just like Christ was. The scene where he is brought back after his first attempt to flee, broken and beaten, is a direct copy of Christ's return after being tortured. Luke's famous line, "I ain't beat yet," is a reflection of how Christ kept going even though he was hurting. In the last few minutes of the movie, the most powerful sacred images happen. Luke's friend Dragline says that after he died, Luke was happy, which suggests that he had won in a way that was beyond his body. In the last picture, Luke's smiling face is superimposed on a crossroads that was taken in a way that makes it look like a crucifix. It's easy to understand. Luke has been killed, just like Christ, but has symbolically won over the system that killed him. Even though Paul Newman was Jewish, he looked at these Christian ideas from a universal point of view. He once said that the use of religious images wasn't meant to promote Christianity in particular. Was about using a story that most Americans know to talk about sacrifice, about how one person goes through pain to inspire others. Luke is made into a sacrifice, and his spirit lives on after his body is killed. Later screenwriter Frank Pearson revealed that this was the plan. When people question systems of power, they are brutally put down. This article talks about how the human spirit can rise above that suppression. The bad guys can kill Luke, but they can't kill what the other inmates see in him. Luke's famous line, "Nobody can eat 50 eggs, takes on a whole new meaning with this carefully thought-out message. The challenge isn't just a bed in the prison yard, it turns into a kind of last dinner, a way for the prisoners to get to know each other, and for Luke to rise from being a troublemaker to a spiritual leader." The political comment that is hidden. When it comes to jail dramas, Cool Hand Luke is great as a character study. There was also a political comment about the United States during the Vietnam War. When the movie came out in theaters in 1967, it was during the height of anti-war protests, and a time when people were talking a lot about institutional power. Luke's background as a decorated war hero, who comes home and is jailed for a small crime, made a direct comment on how Vietnam veterans are treated. Like a lot of real soldiers, Luke had been praised for being violent in battle, but punished for much smaller offenses in everyday life. After seeing how chaotic war was, he couldn't accept arbitrary authority. This showed how many veterans were losing hope. In a way, the jail camp setting of the movie was like a miniature version of modern America. The chiefs and bosses stood for the government, and the prisoners represented regular people whose freedoms were being taken away more and more. Frank Pearson, the screenwriter, said in later comments that we were wondering what kind of society sends men to war to die, and then throws them away when they come back changed. Boss Godfrey, the man in the sunglasses who had no eyes, represented the silent violence of the state's institutions. His lack of reaction to violence was similar to how many protesters felt about police and military activities against civilians. The fact that he never talks while giving punishments says that he follows the rules without thinking about what is right or wrong. The film may be most subversive when it questions the idea of recovery in general and in prisons. The famous line by the captain about making inmates' minds right shows how institutions often want people to do more than just follow the rules. They also want people to change their minds and adopt their ideals. Luke doesn't just want to avoid being hurt physically, he also doesn't want to give up his mind. Modern reviewers mostly ignore these political aspects, focusing instead on Newman's charming performance and how fun the movie is to watch. This mistake was done on purpose in part. Stuart Rosenberg, the director, knew that putting political comments into interesting stories would help the message reach people who might not have paid attention to it otherwise. Paul Newman, who was more publicly active than many stars of his time, saw how subversive the movie could be, setting and move it back a little, so that people can understand the message without feeling like they are being lectured. This political undertone helps explain why Cool Hand Luke is still important years after it came out. Its questions about institutional power, blind loyalty, and the human cost of forced conformity are still relevant in today's political climate. The truth about the famous egg-eating scene. Many fans think that the scene where Luke eats 50 eggs on a bet is the most important part of the movie, because it shows how stubborn he is, and how much the prisoners need hope and fun. This famous scene, which was taken straight from Don Pierce's original book, was very hard for both the producers and Paul Newman himself. The scene had to be carefully planned so that it would stay the same over several days of filming. Conrad Hall, the cinematographer, made a thorough shot list that let Newman give the impression of eating 50 eggs while actually only eating a few. The production used different camera views, editing methods, and prop eggs to make it look like everyone ate everything. Given his dedication to realism, Newman did have to eat a lot of real eggs while shooting, though not nearly 50. In later parts of the scene, the actual pain that could be seen on his face wasn't just acting. The long shooting and heat while eating eggs caused real stress, which the camera caught. Director Stuart Rosenberg knew that the egg-eating challenge wasn't just a random bet in the jail yard. Based on the movie's themes, it becomes a test of will against impossible odds, similar to Luke's bigger fight against the jail system. As the other inmates care more and more about Luke's success, the scene goes from funny to almost religious. In order to film the scenes, new camera techniques were used that weren't popular in the 1960s. As the task goes on, cinematographer Conrad Hall used strange angles and lighting to make the movie feel more and more like a dream. The prisoners standing in a circle to watch became more stylized and traditional, which drew attention to the scene's role as a form of community building. George Kennedy, who played Dragline, said that the scene where they ate eggs completely changed how the players interacted with each other. Before that scene, we were all playing different people. Something changed after they filmed it. With Paul at the center, the players playing prisoners started to work together more. It was the same as what was happening to the people in the story. The scene's symbolic meaning goes beyond the clear reference to Christ. The 50 eggs represent an impossible job that can be done by sheer willpower. This is similar to Luke's ultimate goal of spiritual freedom, which seems impossible while he is in prison, but is possible when he refuses to give up his faith in her. The egg-eating scene is still one of the most memorable in movie history, because it combines a physical challenge with new technology and a symbolic meaning. The scene is fun to watch, helps the characters grow, and makes a philosophical statement about the strength of human determination. The shades are more than just cool. Boss Godfrey's reflective sunglasses have become one of the most famous parts of his outfit, but they're important for more than just making him look scary. Woodward explained that having the jail guard wear the sunglasses put up a wall right away between my character and everyone else, that made Godfrey hard to predict, which in a basic way made him scary. The lens's ability to reflect light serves a certain story purpose. When inmates look at their boss Godfrey, they see themselves in the mirror. A picture that shows how the prison system pushes prisoners to face how helpless they are. The sunglasses change Godfrey from a person to a symbol of the prisoner's fear and pain. The sunglasses have something to do with the movie's holy theme. Godfrey turns into a dark version of God, and an all-seeing spirit that never talks but judges and punishes. Woodward doesn't say a word in the movie, so his silence adds to this godlike quality. He sees many ideas of the divine without explaining them, and moves without warning. Throughout the movie, cinematographer Conrad Hall used the sunglasses to help him see. In a number of important scenes, he carefully set up the lighting so that the lenses would reflect light and show small versions of the prisoners or the scenery. In the last hunting scene, when the glasses quickly reflect Luke before shots are fired, these reflections serve as visual foreshadowing. The sunglasses are also a comment on the power of institutions. Godfrey's decision to cover his eyes is a metaphor for how systems of authority often hide their real intentions and work without being open about them. He turns into the personification of impersonal force and power, without any humanity or responsibility. These sunglasses had an effect on culture that went far beyond the movie itself. Even though aviator styles aren't new, they became very famous after Cool Hand Luke came out. More importantly, mirrored sunglasses became a common way to show that a movie character was an emotionless authority figure, especially in movies that were critical of police or military power. This complex set of symbols helps explain why Boss Godfrey is still one of the scariest bad guys in movies, even though he doesn't say a word. The sunglasses change him from a simple character to a classic example of a cold, heartless leader, a visual metaphor that audiences still connect with decades after the movie came out. The disputed ending of the first movie. Even though Cool Hand Luke's ending powerfully wraps up the movie's themes, there is proof that other endings were considered during production. In the last few seconds of the movie, Luke is shot off screen, and Dragline tells the other inmates that Luke was smiling at the end. This intentionally vague ending has caused debate among moviegoers for decades. Luke's story ends differently in Don Pierce's original book. The main plot point stays the same, but the book gives more specifics about Luke's last moments. Adapting a book to the big screen usually means making changes, and author Frank Pearson made a lot of changes to make the ending work better in the movie theater. Director Stuart Rosenberg has said that different ideas for the ending scenes were talked about while they were being filmed. It was hard to find the right mix between recognizing that power structures usually crush people and staying positive about Luke's spiritual victory. A sad ending would take away from the movie's message about how strong the human spirit is, while an upbeat finish would feel out of place in the world of the story. This balance is achieved by the movie's ending, which suggests rather than directly shows. The movie lets you think about Luke's last moments in a spiritual way by showing his death through Dragline's eyes, instead of showing Luke's death itself. Putting a smiling face on top of the crossroads picture changes what could have been a sad ending into something more transcendent. Some people who worked on the production didn't agree with this method. Some cast members apparently thought that the movie's message about institutional violence would have been stronger if Luke's death had been shown in more detail. Others said that leaving things more open-ended actually made the movie more powerful, because it made people think about its themes instead of just watching it end. It's interesting that Warner Brothers execs were also worried about the ending, but for different reasons. Studio notes from the time of filming show that some execs were afraid that killing off the charismatic lead, played by their biggest star, would turn off viewers. Suggested more hopeful options where Luke might be able to live or escape. Rosenberg refused to go along with these ideas because he knew that Luke's physical loss was important to the movie's themes. The compromise, which kept the death but showed it in a roundabout way, met the studio's business needs while keeping the story's artistic and philosophical heart. Frank Pearson later thought about how well the finish worked, giving things meaning. Some watchers focus on how sad it is that Luke was killed by the system, while others focus on how spiritually successful he was. Both ways of looking at it are correct, and that's what makes the movie so powerful. This well-thought-out finish helps to show why Cool Hand Luke has had such a big effect on culture. It doesn't just send a simple message about institutional cruelty or individual heroism. Instead, it gives viewers a chance to think about freedom, conformity, and what real victory means when they can't physically leave. Newman's close relationship with Luke, to do without having a good reason. Newman's own time in the service shaped how he played the part. While Luke was in the army, Newman was in the Navy during World War II. He was a pilot instead of an infantryman. He knew how hard it is to adjust mentally when leaving the military and going back to civilian life, and he knew that it could be dangerous for someone trained for war to deal with small-minded civilian officials. The actors were known for their political and social activity, which matched Luke's fight against institutional power. During the 1960s, Newman became more involved with progressive issues. He first backed the civil rights movement, and then spoke out against the Vietnam War. Cool Hand Luke gave him a way to talk about his worries about totalitarian rule and the stifling of personal freedom without making a directly political movie. Even by his own high standards, Newman's preparation for the part was surprisingly thorough. Spent time with author Don Pierce, who had been a member of a chain gang like the one in the movie. Newman learned not only about the physical aspects of prison work, but also about the ways that inmates kept their sense of self while living in conditions that were dehumanizing. Luke was such an important part of Newman's career because it showed him being both charming and vulnerable. Luke Newman told me that I was often cast as the good-looking rebel who always wins in the end. Luke showed me what happens when the system is stronger than the person, at least in a physical sense. It also showed me that losing physically doesn't always mean losing spiritually. Newman changed the way he did acting after getting the part. After writing Cool Hand Luke, he looked for people with more layers and less clear morals, getting away from the simple heroic parts he played in the beginning of his career. When Newman played Luke, he learned how to play characters with more depth, which helped movies like Butch Cassidy and The Sundance Kid, The Sting, and later The Verdict. The fact that Newman kept talking about the figure decades later may say the most when talking about his own way of living. In his later years, when he received Lifetime Achievement Awards, Newman often used Luke as an example of the kind of determined resilience he admired, the ability to keep standing up even after being knocked down many times. This emotional connection helps explain why Newman's performance was so great.
Luke Jackson wasn't just another character for him, it was a way to talk about how he felt about people's worth when there were processes in place to take it away. A theme that would continue to shape his decisions as an actor and his life outside of movies. The effect on culture: failure to explain. Few lines in the history of movies have become so deeply ingrained in American culture as the captain's famous speech. Not being able to connect is what we have here. This one line, delivered with chilling precision by actor Strather Martin, went beyond the movie and became a cultural touchstone that people still talk about more than 50 years later. The length of the line is part of what makes it powerful. Martin, a character actor who specialized in playing guys with small frames but a lot of authority, says the line in a way that emphasizes how threatening it sounds. The almost regretful, soft-spoken tone is at odds with the violence that follows, creating a disturbing dissonance that is a perfect example of establishment hypocrisy. The line was written by screenwriter Frank Pearson to sum up how power structures explain away their worst actions. Pearson said that the point of that line was to show how institutions blame the victims of their own violence. There's no sign that the captain is aware of his part in the breakdown. He's saying that Luke is to blame for not speaking, which he means as not giving in. The line shows up twice in the movie. First, when the captain punishes Luke for his first acts of resistance, and then again when Luke says it again in a mocking way right before he is shot and killed. This repeat changes what it means. Luke's use of the captain's words shows how silly it is to say that someone failed to connect when what they really mean is that they didn't follow orders without question. A lot of people who watch don't know that Strather Martin's delivery was highly influenced by his upbringing in the South. Martin was born in Indiana and raised in Texas. He based the captain's speech patterns on adults in power he had met as a child, especially school administrators who put on a nice face while giving harsh punishments. After the movie came out, the term quickly became part of everyday American speech. It started to show up in political cartoons, newspaper headlines, and everyday speech as a shorthand way to talk about any situation where power relations made it hard to really understand. During the height of the Vietnam War protests, people on both sides would quote this line to make fun of the other side. Its effects on culture went beyond serious situations. Many movies and TV shows have made fun of or used this line in some way, from Rush Hour and The Simpsons to Family Guy and Reservoir Dogs. The word has been used in the lyrics of songs by bands like Guns N' Roses and Civil War. This wide use shows how well the line describes a universal relationship between those in power and those who are ruled over. It's interesting that over the years, both conservative and progressive critics have used the line, though they have all found different meanings in it. Some see it as a criticism of how proud institutions are of themselves. Some see it as a message on how important it is to follow the rules of society. This lack of clarity has kept the term useful even as political situations have changed. Strather Martin, who died in 1980, was surprised that this one line came to define his career, even though he was in a lot of movies. In an interview in 1977, he said, "I couldn't have known that 9 words would follow me for the rest of my life, but I can see why they struck a chord." That line says something very important about how power works when one person can make the other person do what they want. Failure to communicate's lasting power shows how Cool Hand Luke went beyond its time and place to make observations about authority that are still important today.